Okay. Tonight we're going to continue in the mini-series in Great Debates, Great Decisions, and Great Deciders, the mini-series of the great D's about living in the land of Israel. We spoke about last week really an introduction to the entire mitzvah itself to live in the land of Israel. We spoke about how really the Rishonim across the board, the Ramban makes it abundantly obvious that there's a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. The Rambam also, it seems like, according to most poskim, assume it's a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. According to some, it may only be a rabbinic obligation to live in the land of Israel. But according to most, the Avnei Nezer wrote famously that the Rambam, of course, assumes it's a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel, and the reason he didn't include it in his list of the 613 is because he didn't need to. There's so many other mitzvahs that can only be done if one is living in the land of Israel. And therefore, it's abundantly obvious that there would be a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel, according to the Rambam. As my Rabbi Rav Hershel Schachter said, that's just basic Judaism. It's like the main theme in the entire Torah, starting already from Parshas Lech Lecha, going through through the Torah, through Moshe Rabbeinu's death, and even going into the prophets. The land of Israel is always, one of the main focuses, and therefore, of course, there's a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. And tonight, I'd like to speak about the exceptions to the mitzvah to live in the land of Israel, because if we just would have ended the class the way we ended it last week, it should have ended with me picking everybody up and getting into a van and heading to the airport and putting up a stink about the fact that they're not going to let us fly to Israel right now because we have a religious obligation to go fly to the land of Israel. And as soon as this pandemic is over, so all of us should buy the first plane ticket out to go and live in the land of Israel, right? That's the way the class ended last week. There's a mitzvah to go live in the land of Israel, and then therefore we should all be going right now. So what are we doing here? Well, what's going on? Well, what are we doing in La Jolla, California, or in San Diego? We should be tied up in our homes right now in quarantine in the land of Israel. After all, there is a mitzvah. There's an obligation to do so. I'm a religious Jew, and therefore I follow all 613 mitzvot, including the mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. So what is going on? Why is it that so many of us do not live in the land of Israel? So there are really three exceptions that are found in the Gemara. One exception, it's not found in the Gemara, but it's found in Tosfos. Tosfos records in Maseches Ksubis on Daf Kuf Yud Amud Aleph. Tosfos over there records the opinion of Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen. Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen writes that the end of Maseches Ksubis is all of the amazing stories in Shas about the land of Israel, all the amazing Agadah. I once heard a beautiful pshat from my Rebbe, Reb David Hirsch Shlita. Why is it in Maseches Ksubis of all places that there's that the Agadah, the stories, the magnificent tales of the land of Israel exist in a Masechta that really has to do with marital law? So he explained because there are Gemaras that make this clear that we have a special relationship, like a marriage between us and God. That Bnei Yisrael is like Hashem's Kala, and therefore our Ksuba is the land of Israel, being that the land of Israel is something that had been promised to us, almost like a dowry. Or like a prenuptial agreement to the connection that we have with God is the land of Israel. And therefore, all the amazing stories having to do and many of the laws pertaining to the land of Israel exist at the end of Maseches Ksubis. And over there, Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen writes that there's no mitzvah to live in the land of Israel today. He says, why? Because it's too dangerous. It's too dangerous to go live in the land of Israel, and therefore, there is no mitzvah to live there. The Avnei Nezer, already in the late 1800s, and if the Avnei Nezer is writing this in the late 1800s, certainly it applies in our day and age. He says that this concern of Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen does not apply today anymore. It is much safer to travel to the land of Israel. Again, he's writing this in the late 1800s. It is not dangerous anymore to travel to the land of Israel. And, the land of Israel itself is safe to live in. And of course, if it applied then, it applies now. And therefore, this opinion of Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen no longer applies today. That is the opinion of the Avnei Nezer. This is also quoted in the Pischei Tshuva, the same understanding. In fact, the Pischei Tshuva says that he quotes from the Maharit, he feels that this opinion of Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen actually never existed. That there is really no opinion in any of the Bali Tosos that there would be no mitzvah to live in the land of Israel, and it must have been a misprint or a student in class, one of the students of Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen in class misinterpreted their Rebbe and actually wrote their notes incorrectly, and it was recorded in an incorrect manner. It was an error, a printing error done by Tosfos to have printed this opinion of Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen. In fact, it really never existed. But even if it did exist, it certainly does not apply anymore today, that it would be too dangerous to live in the land of Israel. So that's the first exception. The second exception is found in the Gemara in Bava Basra. The Gemara in Bava Basra on Daf Tzadi Aleph, Amud Aleph, tells us that if one would experience financial hardship by going to live in the land of Israel, so then there would be no obligation to go live in the land of Israel. The mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael only applies if you'd be able to live there in a financially responsible way. But if someone were to live there and have to live in poverty, and they would experience tremendous financial hardship, there would be no mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. Now, the Pischei Tshuva and Rav Shlomo Kluger and the Elef L'Chashlomo, Rav Shlomo Kluger has another sefer. It's not just Elef L'Chashlomo. He has another work. He was a tremendous Talmud Chacham. He has another work called Chachma Shlomo, which is a play on his name, because Klug in Yiddish means someone who's smart. So Shlomo Kluger wrote a sefer called Chachma Shlomo. So Rav Shlomo Kluger and the Pischei Tshuva and the Avnei Nezer explain that while, of course, this Gemara in Bava Basra is, the way that we assume that if one would experience financial hardship, there would be no mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. But that doesn't mean that if someone is making $300,000 outside the land of Israel, in the land of Israel, they'd be making $250,000, that would be called financial hardships. If a person is going to have to scale back on their life a little bit by going to live in the land of Israel, then of course they should go live there. You're going to fulfill a mitzvah. What we're talking about is a scenario where someone would go and live there and it would be tremendously burdensome on them financially, that they wouldn't be able to live properly. In such a scenario, there would be no mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. But short of that, of course, you should be going to live in the land of Israel. That's number two. Number three, and this is probably the most prevalent and probably most common of all of the exceptions, is really, it's two packaged in one. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, the Gemara says that there are two exceptions that would prevent someone, in a justified way from going to live in the land of Israel. What is that? If they need to live outside the land of Israel in order so that they can find an appropriate spouse, or if they need to live outside the land of Israel in order so that they can learn Torah and grow religiously. If there's a specific yeshiva or a specific community that one being a part of it is helping them grow spiritually, so then therefore, says the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, one would not have to go and move to the land of Israel because they are growing spiritually. And of course, the same would be true if one it would be easier for someone to find an appropriate spouse by going to move by staying outside the land of Israel, then therefore they can stay outside the land of Israel. So the Avnei Nezer says that really each one of these exceptions, again, the exceptions are really three or four exceptions to the rule. Number one, if it's too dangerous to go live there. Number two, if there would be financial hardship by living there, that you would be impoverished by living there. Number three, in order to learn Torah, grow religiously. And number four, in order to find an appropriate spouse, to have an appropriate marriage. Those would be the exceptions to living in the land of Israel, and you would have a justified reason as to why you are not living in the land of Israel. So says the Avnei Nezer, he says that really all of these reasons boil down to one basic principle, which is what Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is all about, what settling in the land of Israel is all about. At the end of the day, God wants that we should be able to settle in the land of Israel and actually build up the land of Israel and actually make it into a successful society that projects what true Torah values are, what projects what true moral, ethical behavior is, in order to be a place that acts as a model for the rest of the world and a center for what proper behavior is, and to be that model for the rest of the world. So if someone is going to go move there, but they're going to bring down the society around them by going to have to take funds from other people because they are going to be impoverished by living there, and they're not going to contribute to the society, or if it is going to be, obviously, if it's going to be dangerous and they might die from living there, so then, of course, that would be the same principle, that you are not contributing to the growth and sustainability of Eretz Yisrael. To be able to have a growth, a self-growth, in a way where you are going to become a mature enough person, someone who's matured in such a way where you will be able to be successful by living in the land of Israel. You've grown enough spiritually that you're going to be able to uplift the land and uplift the people around you, uplift the society. You have a marriage that is such that you'll be able to, together as a unit, uplift the society. So then go and live in the land of Israel. But if you're not yet ready, so then better that you stay put. This really is, says the Avnei Nezer, this reason is really the reason why so many people, unfortunately, are still living outside the land of Israel. Because while we are outside the land of Israel, we are basically readying ourselves. We're getting ourselves ready. We're in that prosdor. We're in that hallway, that entryway before we do be able to go and live in the land of Israel. Now, with that said, if someone feels as though they're able to accomplish those goals in the land of Israel itself, then of course there would be a mitzvah to go. There would be an obligation to go. That if a person can get themselves settled in a community, if a person can find an appropriate spouse, if a person can learn Torah and grow spiritually, if a person is going to be able to make ends meet accordingly, and they're going to be able to live in a normal way financially by going to live in the land of Israel, then of course you go. That's not even a question. However, if someone feels as though they still need a little bit more time to get themselves ready before they go, then that would be a justified reason to hang back and get yourself ready accordingly before going to move to the land of Israel. I want to now move into to another topic. It's Inyana Diyoma, and I'd like to speak about the day of Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day, where Israel became in 1948 became a independent state. And I'd like to speak about, Yom Ha'atzmaut, the way that my father likes to say it is that Yom Ha'atzmaut is not a holiday, it's a holy day. And I'd like to speak about whether or not that is true, what the different perspectives are, and I'd like to premise with, the Gemara in Yevamos, on Daf Tzadi Beis. I'm sorry, Samach Beis. The Gemara says, right now we're in the period of Sfira. And I was speaking about this with Jack this afternoon, that right now we're in the period of Sfira Sa'omer. And during this period, the Gemara tells us that there were 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva that died. There were 12,000 pairs of students, 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva all over the land of Israel. And they all died during one period of time. Because, and it was during this period, 33 days between Pesach and Shavuos. Why? Mipnei shelo nahagu kavod ze leze. Because they did not honor or respect one another. They didn't honor or respect each other in the realm of Torah. And because of that lack of respect, 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died. It's there is one opinion that's found in the Gaonim that in reality this was actually a censored Gemara. That in reality there was a pogrom that took place that murdered these 24,000 students, and they needed to be able to record this story, this tragic tale of all the students of Rabbi Akiva dying, but they didn't know how to record it in a way that would be safe. That was a big issue. The censors, were scared that more of these pogroms would happen. So what did they do? They recorded the most, far-fetched idea they could think of. That, why is that these 24,000 students died? Oh, it must be because they did not give honor to one another. They gave kavod to one another, which we know, of course, can't be the case. Why? Because who is the Rebbe? Rabbi Akiva. What did Rabbi Akiva say? Zekal gadol b'Torah v'yahavta l'recha kamocha. That to love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's not possible that the students of Rabbi Akiva would dismiss one another, would not show honor to one another, and therefore it must be that it was a pogrom. However, that's one opinion that historically has not been found to be accurate. But the basic understanding of the Gemara is that really there was a magefa, there was a plague that hit the students of Rabbi Akiva because they did not give honor to one another, and that means that they didn't honor each other's opinions with regard to Torah. And my Rebbe, Rav David Hirsch, always pointed out to us that he felt as though it's so appropriate that Yom HaAtzmaut, Yom Yerushalayim, and days that on the calendar have been accompanied, unfortunately, with a lot of political agenda and a lot of attacking on both sides. What is the appropriate way to celebrate and commemorate or not celebrate these days? And on both sides of the line, there are people that are attacking one another, and Jews that are attacking one another, and people get so, for hits, they get so agitated with regard to, do you say Hal on Yom Ha'atzmaut? Do you not say Hal on Yom Ha'atzmaut? Do you dance with live music on Yom Ha'atzmaut? Should you be sitting in ashes on Yom Ha'atzmaut? And it just becomes so, people they are so agitated at one another. They're so for hits. And they completely miss the whole boat of this Gemara, that during this time period in particular is the time period where we have to be looking at one another's opinions and saying, okay, you do your way, I do my way. I'm Sephardic, you're Ashkenazi. We're good. It's fine. We each do things differently, and that's okay. No one's yelling at one another on Hanukkah. You don't have enough menorahs in your house, you Sephardi fool. No one's doing that on Hanukkah. What's the difference now? Okay, so I say Hallel, you don't say Hallel. Leave me alone. It's okay. Everybody's okay. And finding the respect is something we have to say. So that's just a disclaimer before we get into this topic. There are really 5 different hashkafas, 5 different outlooks with regard to whether Yom HaAtzmaut is a holiday or a holy day. To go to one polar is Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, who is the Rosh Yeshiva of the Merkaz Harav Yeshiva, the big yeshiva in Yerushalayim that was founded by his father, Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, the first chief rabbi of then Palestine and British Mandate. And his son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, was the Rosh Yeshiva of Merkaz Harav, and he was the Rosh Yeshiva in 1948. And in 1948, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook proclaimed that on Hey Iyar, when the state of Israel was established and declared its independence, that was a day that should be celebrated as any full-fledged Yom Tov. That on any other full-fledged Yom Tov that does not have attached with it an Isser Malacha, a prohibition of doing labor, it should be celebrated with every accoutrement in the world. It should be celebrated with a full Hallel, with bracha, the same way you would do it, in the same place you would do it. In tefillah, there should be special types of tefillos that are established on the day. There should be live music, there should be singing, there should be hakafos, there should be a whole seder to the day, because that is a full-fledged Yom Tov. And we'll get to how one could establish such a thing, but that was the opinion of Rav Kook. On the other polar, the opposite polar, was the Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, in his Sefer Vayol Moshe, which, by the way, I have a copy of each of their Sfarim. I have a copy of Rav Kook's Sefer, and I have a copy of Vayol Moshe. And Rav Yoel Teitelbaum has a book that's this thick. It's, a regular size, book that's, full on doctrine as to why the state of Israel is something that is not just, not something that should be celebrated, but it's something that is a negative thing. And he wrote how we cannot acknowledge the state of Israel as being anything significant, and we as a Jewish people cannot overtake the land of Israel to gain sovereignty over it until Mashiach comes. And therefore, the day when Israel declared its independence is a negative day. However, in the, what I would say, I guess, the more centrist, more accepted Orthodox Judaism has accepted are really three different opinions. And those are the opinions, number one, of Rav Ovadia Yosef and Rav Soloveitchik. Rav Ovadia Yosef and Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Ovadia Yosef in his Sefer Yabia Omer has a long tshuva about this, and Rabbi Soloveitchik later was published as an essay called Kol Dodi Dofek, but was given at first as a lecture on Yom HaAtzmaut in 1955, where he describes, like Rav Ovadia Yosef, how there is no question that the day of Yom HaAtzmaut is a significant day. It is a day that even carries with it a nes that would be proclaimed as a miracle, and it should be treated as such. It should be treated as a very significant day, a happy day, a day that clearly a miracle took place. There's no question that a miracle took place. One of my favorite books is the book The Prime Ministers by Yehuda Avner, which we'll share. Probably my favorite excerpt from that story later. But just you read through that book and you just can't help but see. You feel as though you're reading, like miracles, open miracles, like you're reading Tanakh. Like God is making these open miracles to keep the state of Israel alive, to keep Eretz Yisrael and Medina Yisrael functioning accordingly. And therefore, there's no question that it is a significant day, Yom HaAtzmaut. However, that does not mean that it should be celebrated as a Yom Tov. Just because a miracle happened that day does not mean that we should be mandated to treat it as a Yom Tov. Those are two different things. There is the day in which a miracle happens, and you should treat it and be gleeful and be screaming from the rooftops of how joyous you are, but that doesn't mean that it carries with it any sort of halachos, that it should be, from a halachic perspective, be treated as any other day, but a day where you are extraordinarily happy. And I'd like to show you soon. I'll put on the screen a video of Rav Soloveitchik when he describes his feelings about Hallel and Yom HaAtzmaut. There's also the opinion of the Chazon Ish, which is probably the other most more accepted opinion, where the Chazon Ish writes similar to to Rav Ovadia Yosef and Rav Soloveitchik, but downplays the fact that the day itself carries any significance. He says that, of course, the establishment of the State of Israel is something significant and something amazing that happened, but that doesn't mean that the day itself carries any sort of significance. So a little different than Rav Soloveitchik, downplaying the significance of the day itself. However, we should point out that the Chazon Ish and Rav Yosef Shlomo Kahaneman, the Panovich Rav, both of them did not say Tachanon on Yom Ha'atzmaut, and in fact, to this day, flying over the Panovich Yeshiva on Yom Ha'atzmaut is the Israeli flag, because the Panovich Rav actually felt even more strongly than the Chazon Ish that the day is a significant day. There's also an opinion that's probably a very accepted opinion amongst Orthodox Jews in America, is the opinion of my Rebbe, Rav Herschel Schechter Shlita, where Rav Schechter says that we are experiencing right now Haschalta de Geula, the beginning of the redemption process. And therefore, being that it's the beginning of the redemption process, he says, like his Rebbe of Soloveitchik, that it is no question that it is a significant day, and the day itself does carry significance. And however, he does not feel as though it would be appropriate to establish Hallel as part of davening, but he himself, says a Chetzi Hallel, which is basically just saying some prakim of Tehillim without a bracha. He says a short Hallel at the end of his personal davening. The question of establishing a Yom Tov on a day when a miracle happens is something that really has been discussed, a number of generations ago. It is discussed by the Maram al-Shachar, that's quoted by the Magen Avram. The Magen Avram is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. It's a commentary that is probably most followed amongst Ashkenazim, that, if you come into a disagreement between the Magen Avram or really anyone else, the Magen Avram, who is the one who reigns supreme, he lived a very short time, like many of the commentaries, unfortunately, on the Shulchan Aruch. The first commentary on the Shulchan Aruch was Rav Moshe Isserlis, the Ramah, who only lived 42 years. You have the Shach, who only lived 40 years. You have these major commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch only living the short amount of time. The Magen Avram only lived a short 46 years, from 1637 to 1682. The Magen Avram lived, but was a powerhouse in his Psak Halacha. And the Magen Avram writes in Siman Tafresh Pei-Vav in Sifkan Hey, he writes, Yecholim b'nei ir, that the people of a city are allowed to lesakein b'haskama u'b'cherem aleihem, that if a community establishes upon themselves v'al habayim achreihem, and anyone that comes afterwards in that city, la'asos purim b'yom shenasa bones, to create a holiday like Purim, that it has a celebratory feel to it, it has a festive feel to the day, even though there would be no prohibition of doing work. If you drive on that day, it would be like Purim. There is nothing wrong with establishing that on the day when a miracle happens. This is also quoted in the Mishnah Berurah, that on the day a miracle happens, one could establish a Yom Tov. And the Chai Adam, Rav Avram Danzig, who was a late 18th century, early 19th century, lived from the mid 1700s to 1820. The Chai Adam, Rav Avram Danzig, was a grandson of a mechutin to the Vilna Gaon. He liked to call himself a mechutin to the Vilna Gaon, but it was really his grandfather that was a mechutin his father was a mechutin to the Vilna Gaon. So he used to call himself a mechutin to the Vilna Gaon. I guess, if you're that close and, you can get away with it, I guess it's a good thing to brag about. But he was very close with the Gra, and he wrote, a number of Sfarim that really became like the Bible in Europe. when people would read the Chai Adam, the Chai Adam was the final say. And that was really, you can give credit to Rav Chaim Volozhiner. Rav Chaim Volozhiner, who we spent a lot of time speaking about. We had a whole series just on Rav Chaim Volozhiner and the Volozhin Yeshiva. Rav Chaim Volozhiner, when the Chai Adam, when Rav Avram Danzig brought his book over to Reb Chaim Volozhiner to get a haskama, to get an approbation to his book. So Reb Chaim Volozhiner looked through it, which it basically is a collection, it's a codification of laws that are practical today. He doesn't go through all of the prevalent sources. He just tells you this is what you do. Basically just a handbook, a basic handbook to Judaism, similar to like the Rambam, but a lot shorter and a lot more practical. And Rabbi Chaim Volozhiner looked this over, and he said, I'm sorry, I can't give a haskama, I can't give my approbation to such a work. He says, why not? He says, because people are going to see your work, and it's a fantastic work, and people are going to see that it's so accurate, that you hit the nail on the head on every single point, that people are going to stop learning Torah. That you're going to tell them just what to do, and everyone's going to stop learning Torah. Why? Because they're going to open up the Chai Adam, and they're just going to see what I have to do. And once they know the Chai Adam, that's it. That's going to be the end of Torah study. Because no one's going to have to try and figure out what to do, going back to the original sources and trying to learn through the sugya. No one's going to try and learn through the topic, because I don't need to. All I have to do is just open up a Chai Adam, and that's it. I know what to do. So the Chai Adam said, okay, I get that. Is there anything I can do to change your mind? So Reb Chaim Volozhiner says yes. If at the end of each paragraph you gave end notes, that you basically just wrote in one sentence all of the citations that you used to come up with your psak, with your opinion. So at the end of each paragraph in the Chai Adam, you know what? I'll show it to you. What we have this Zoom, I might as well use it to my advantage. Okay, this is a Chai Adam. Okay. At the end of each paragraph, take a look. At the end of each paragraph in the Chai Adam, he points out what the source is. I don't know if you could see it in the screen. But you can see in the small brackets, he points out what the source is. You go up to any page on the Chai Adam, you see these end notes in the paragraph, in the parentheses. He points out these end notes, exactly how he came to this psak. And Reb Chaim Volozhiner said, I want you to do that so that someone could argue with you. In order so that there could be a give and take, in order so that there could be the spirit of learning behind, behind your work, that there isn't just, okay, I'm going to open up the Chai Adam and see what to do, which is a tremendous resource, but I want people to be able to do that and also learn from it, going back to the original sources. So the Chai Adam was accepted like the Bible, and over there he actually writes, with regards to this halacha of setting up a Yom Tov when a nace happens, if a miracle happens on a specific day, establishing a Yom Tov, and he paskins the same as the Magen Avram, and then after him, the Mishnah Berurah also paskin like that. But he says that, this actually happened in our community. And he tells a story. He says that there was a fire that broke out in his community in the 1760s, I believe, that there was a community, there was a fire that broke out that ripped through the town. It ripped through the town, and it caused tremendous destruction. There were deaths. It was a horrific thing. He said that there was not a single person in the town that was not affected by it. He said there wasn't even a single person in the town that didn't have some sort of a scar or bruise from this fire. He says, though, not a single Jewish neshama perished. This was an open miracle. That even though there was fire raging, people's homes were destroyed and burnt down, and he said not a single person didn't walk away with some sort of a scar, but nevertheless, there was not a single casualty. Therefore, we established in our community a Yom Tov on that day in order to recognize that a nace, he says that the nace happened, and therefore we have to recognize it, and therefore we established a Yom Tov on that day. And he says that there were specific tehillim that they included. They they recited Hallel and the like, and that is what happened. The Chai Adam actually did this. So the question is whether or not we could do the same on Yom Ha'atzmaut. We said that it is, no question that this is a miracle. But the question is whether or not the miracle was really, established, on this day, or really this day of Hey Iyar was really a beginning to a much longer miracle. It wasn't just a one-day thing. It's not like, Yetzias Mitzrayim happened on Tesvav Nisan. That's it. We have testimony in the Torah itself that it happened on a specific day, right? We have a testimony in the Megillah on what day the Jewish people were supposed to be killed, right? There's a specific day that's referenced in Tanakh for when certain miracles took place, and therefore the holidays were established around that specific date. With regard to Yom Ha'atzmaut, that might not necessarily be the case, and that's why you'll have these differing opinions about whether or not Hallel should be recited. I have to show you now this video of Rav Soloveitchik talking about his opinion with regards to Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut. Take a look at this. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
Ich will am Sommer nicht austeitschen und nicht fahrteitschen und nicht missrepräsentieren und nicht schreiben in Eretz Yisrael wegen der...
Can everyone hear it okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, everyone can hear it well? Okay, I'm going to back up. I wish there was a way I could slow it down because he's speaking so fast. If you understand the Yiddish, obviously that's
Well, there's English.
What was that?
The English is there.
So the English is there, but you're going to see it moves a little quick. But I could pause it every, if people miss something, just speak up.
Ich will am Sommer nicht austeitschen und nicht fahrteitschen und nicht missrepräsentieren und nicht schreiben in Eretz Yisrael wegen dem und gemeinmäßig für die Paper so schreiben. Für die vier bin ich nicht ein Jid, das ist immer sehr enthusiastisch mit Hallel, wenn ich mit dem Verwilzach zu sagen Hallel. Weil der Reich in Shabbos hat gesagt, dass Hallel wird gesagt, dass kol Perek shetiknu anvi. Etwas Rashi verlangt von Hallel, also seine Takonis Nevi. Und sieht Tomen nicht sagen, genau, was damals ist. Deutsch noch nicht durch, ich meine, da keine politische Meinung nicht. Ich meine nicht, ich bin da nicht geworden, mitten in der Nacht, dann gut in die Christen, ganz gut nicht. Aber man darf zugehen, viele Misrochen dürfen zugehen zur Sache, mit der londischen Zugang, nichts da Waffen, Psukim, mit Schreiben Tschüves, was klappt sich an dem Wort zu der anderen, die Tschüves versteht ja mir. Und ist sagen alle, mit der Broche, wir können ausdrücken im Rebbeinischlam die Dankbarschaft und die Doje, mit dem Schir Bashevach zum Rebbeinischlam, mit dem Herzen, und amidavnt, Shem Nesre, und die Psuke des Zimre bei Yidwil, kann mechaben sein, wie viel will, und sie genau eine Sache, ich fand ihn, wie auszudrücken zum Beere, immer Kores Teve und Shir Bashevach, fahren ist im Munde nicht Flores, ein Tag gegräßt nicht im Flores. Ich lege nicht im Flores, geschehen ist dann, als Israel ist ein sehr groß, aber es heißt nicht, damit er sich warten, gleich mit Hallo, mit der Broche und schreien, als der Punkt, als Hallo, wie der kann es angehen, das ist eine Arschkeit. Sie do Intelligenz in Lernen nicht, verstehe. Und man darf wissen, wie zuzugehen zur Frage. Für die Fahrer sei immer Hallo Bochayim, also Mechare von Megale. Das ist auch, es sagt Rashi, Shein Loch Hallel, Shetiknu Anvi, Makol Perek und Perek. Hat er nicht gesagt Rashi. Hat er gesagt Rashi. Für die Fahrer bin ich nicht, dass sie hat sagen Hallo, also, right? Aber das heißt nicht, ich freue auch weniger mit Eretz Yisrael, wie die.
That is one of the most important lines that I think Rav Soloveitchik could have shared with us.
Jeden, wir sagen Hallo mit der Brache. Ich freue sich mehr.
And to Rav Soloveitchik's point is that, no matter what the conclusion is that you come to, it needs to be gone about in an intellectually appropriate, in a halachic, and in a lumdish way. It needs to be come to a conclusion with a rigor, the same way you would with any halachic question. but also to not reject those other opinions. The same way in other areas of halacha, we would not reject those other opinions. In this week's parsha, this is exactly what it says in this week's parsha: that we cannot harbor any sort of hatred towards one another. And this is what's actually preventing the haschalta de geula from becoming the actual geula. In Tehillim, in Perek Kuf Chaf Vav, which we say, every Shabbos and Yantiv during a Seuda, we begin by singing Shir Hamalos. Shir Hamalos b'Shuv Hashem and Shivat Zion Hayinu Kecholmim. That when God returns His presence to Zion, we will be like dreamers. And the Rishonim over there on that pasuk in Tehillim debate what exactly is David HaMelech referring to when he says Hayinu Kecholmim, that will be like dreamers. What does that mean, will be like dreamers? So the Ibn Ezra writes as follows. The Ibn Ezra says, Ein Adam Roa Beheket Hazeh Hapela Hazeh Rak Bechalom. That Hayinu Kecholmim means, according to the Ibn Ezra, that when we are living the Jewish story, the Jewish experience of Galus, that the notion of redemption, the notion of Geula, the notion of actually coming to that full, complete redemption with Mashiach Tzidkenu, it feels like an unattainable dream. It feels like something that we'll never be able to experience. And throughout thousands of years of exile, the concept of Geula, it really just lives in our consciousness, really not more than just a fantasy. That's something that's just a concept. It's not a reality. That's something that is going to happen. Like the Briskerov said, that Tzipita li Yeshua, anticipating the redemption, is something that you have to feel as though Mashiach is coming right now. Not that He's coming tomorrow, that He will come in the future. No. He is coming right now. But it sounds like that's just, me just, it just sounds like I'm saying hot air. Like it's because how it's just a dream. Like it's not real. It's not actually going to happen. That we're just like dreamers. It's like a fantasy. But when the Geula actually happens, then we're actually going to be seeing a dream coming to reality. That it's going to be like Hayinu Kecholmim. That the thing that you would have never actually imagined happening is actually going to happen. And can you imagine that? All our dreams coming true. I mentioned before the book, The Prime Ministers, and over there he sets the stage towards the beginning of the book, only a few dozen pages into the book. Yuda Avner, he sets the scene of what it was like of him and his friends on the eve of May 14th, 1948, on Hey Iyar, as they were approaching Hey Iyar. And he writes that there was a group of about 25 of him and his friends who had gathered together to dig trenches on the western side of Yerushalayim. And among their group, there were Jews from across the spectrum. There were non-religious Jews, religious Jews, there were religious Zionists, there were Hasidim from Mea Sha'arim, all of them together. They were there for the same cause of gaining Jewish sovereignty over the land of Israel, and they were there going into Shabbos Kodesh with pickaxes and hoes in hand, standing there to build trenches, to create some sort of a sense of security, to create some sort of a sense of safety for the Jewish people, even though none of them were qualified from a military perspective. They were cut off from all communication. They didn't have any sort of way of communicating to know really what was going on politically, militarily. They had no clue what was going on. They didn't know if Ben Gurion gave in to the United States to not declare a state. They had no clue what was going on. They didn't know if Begin was going to start a revolt. They were totally cut off from everything. And as they're sitting there, and it apparently was a very, very, very hot day in the oppressive heat, one of their comrades comes screaming up the hill, and he starts screaming, "I have news! I have news!" And they all kind of stop to look at, what happened. And then this individual pauses and takes a breath to just experience and savor what he's about to share with his fellow comrades. And he says, "It happened. David Ben-Gurion just declared the state of Israel an independent state. And as of midnight tonight, there will be Jewish sovereignty over the land of Israel for the first time in 2,000 years. Yehuda Avner writes that there was total silence. And then one of the members of the group stood up, looked at everyone, and said, "Oh my God, what have we done?" Like, Hayinu kecholmen. Like, it's like they're dreamers that, like, it's finally, their dream is coming to reality, finally coming to fruition. Look at what we've done. Where they realize that what David HaMelech described as simply as something that's just a dream, something that's just a fantasy, something that that is now something that they could visit, they could touch, that they could relate to, that we could move there. It's something we could experience. Hayuna kecholmen, but it's something that's now part of our reality. And, as we are currently living this dream, it can't help but bring to mind the very first Rashi al Torah. We mentioned it last week. The very first Rashi al Torah already starts talking about Eretz Yisrael. The Rashi talks about why is it that the Torah begins with Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz, that begin with creation. After all, if the Torah is a rule book, begin with the first rule, the first mitzvah, the 613 mitzvahs, 10 commandments. Why begin with Chodesh Hazeh Lachem, the very first of the commandments? Why begin with creation? Rashi writes the following. He says, "She'im yomru umas ha'olim liYisrael listim atem." So that if the nations of the world turn to the Jewish people and say, "You're thieves, you took the land of Israel from us." Heim omrim lahem kol ha'aretz shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We respond and we say, "Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz." God created the world. All of the world belongs to God. Hashem ha'aretz umloa. God owns everything. Hu bara, he created it. V'natna la'asher yashav be'ena, and he decides who gets what land. B'ratzona natna lahem, b'ratzona natla mehem v'natla lahem. He gives it to whoever he wants, and he gave it to us. He promised it to our forefathers. It is our land. It's not the might or the exclusive domain of the diplomats or even the soldiers whose right it is to the land of Israel, but Hashem himself, God, and God has given it to us. And today was the anniversary of the day when God had given the Jewish people sovereignty over the land of Israel for the first time in more than 2,000 years. This dream is not like other dreams we have. There are different types of dreams. There are dreams that fizzle out, dreams that we know we'll never attain, but then there are certain dreams that we never lose sight of. Rabbi Soloveitchik said, Hayinu kecholmen means that this is a dream we're never going to lose sight of. That's what really tzipita Yeshua is. Really kfelling over the fact that we are living in Aschalta de Geula. That matters. And Hayinu kecholmen is part of our mandate to recognize that everything we do in the effort to turn the Haschalta de Geula into the Geula Shlema matters. That the fact that every single time we daven for the Geula, that matters. And all of our aspirations to build up the land of Israel matter. And the bags that were sitting at the home of the Chavetz Chaim that he packed waiting for Mashiach's arrival matter. And even in the crematoria of Auschwitz, as they were marching to their death, singing Animam be'emuna shlema bevias hamashiach, that we believe with all of our heart that Mashiach is going to come, all of that matters. And we can't lose sight of the fact that each and every one of the tefillos we make, that we say, B'mehera b'yameinu bias hamashiach tzidkenu, B'mehera b'yameinu amen, that we'll be able to see Yerushalayim b'binyana. Every single time that we talk about and we experience and we learn about the importance of the land of Israel, this all matters. As long as lo yisisnas achicha b'lavacha. Because we know that there is one surefire way that this dream will not attain its reality. What's that? If we harbor any sort of hatred within one another. If we carry any sort of sinas chinam amongst one another, if we create differences and divides and separation amongst Klal Yisrael, that is going to continue to be something that's going to continue to leave this reality as something that's really not more than just a haskalta de gula, just a beginning, and maybe we'd even lose that. We have to continue to recognize that the most important thing that we can do to bring the geula shlema, to bring the complete redemption, is through being noheg kavod zeh b'zeh, to give honor to one another, unlike the students of Rabbi Akiva. And specifically during this time where, we have this opportunity to connect with one another, and we as a people are connecting with one another, I feel as though even more than when we were together in our shuls. Not to say, God forbid, that we don't want that to come back soon. We want that to come back tomorrow. But to come back tomorrow and to continue to connect with one another all across the world, and for Jews to connect to each other across the world in this kind of a way where we feel as though there's this urgency to connect to one another is something we have to continue. That even though we'll be back in our comfy, God willing, air-conditioned as well, shul, that it's going to, and we're going to be physically together, but we can't lose sight of the fact that there's an urgency to still be there for Jews all over the world, and to be there for one another, and to uplift one another, and to get rid of any sort of hatred that would exist between one another, that we're there for one another. And through that, b'mher b'yameinu, we should turn the haschalta de geula, the beginning of the redemption, into the geula shlema b'mher b'yameinu. Okay. Next week, I plan on continuing this series. I really like this series of the great deeds of living in the land of Israel. Next week, we'll speak about what the nature of the mitzvah is to live in the land of Israel, how one would accomplish the mitzvah to live in the land of Israel, and halachos pertaining to living in the land of Israel. And we'll keep going with the series, as we've done in the past. We've probably overstayed our welcome in each series, just because there's just so much in each one that I can't stay away. But I wish everyone a wonderful evening, and Mirza Hashem, God willing, hopefully soon enough, we'll be able to learn Torah together, not over Zoom, not even in our shul here in La Jolla, but hopefully in Yerushalayim b'Binyana. All right, everybody, have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much.
I could stay on for another 2 minutes if anyone has any questions.